The story. A love that burned brighter than a comet. The first unspoken rule of Altamira corporate was silence. The majestic glass skyscraper rose like a sharp dagger against the Mexico City sky, but inside it operated with the mechanical precision of a Swiss watch. Muted footsteps on Italian marble, whispered conversations, measured, calculated smiles, never sincere. The empire that Julian Altamira had built operated under a single invisible commandment. The collision, the dawn light filtered in golden cascades through the executive floor windows, when Laura, the head of human resources, urgently gathered the staff. "We need a new executive assistant." Her voice trembled slightly. "Miss Mendez resigned this morning." A nervous murmur rippled through the room. It was the fourth in less than 2 months. "Did she resign or was she destroyed?" someone whispered, causing panicked glances around. "Mr. Altamira needs someone today," Laura continued, deliberately ignoring the question. Her knuckles, white around the folder, betrayed her own fear. "Any internal candidates?" The silence thickened like poisonous fog. No one would voluntarily offer themselves to the slaughterhouse. Julian Altamira had made his last name synonymous with relentless success. At 30, his face appeared in business magazines with headlines crowning him the ruthless genius or the ice strategist. His eyes, a penetrating gray, seemed to dissect any weakness from miles away. His jaw, perpetually tense, rarely relaxed into anything remotely resembling a smile. "My sister has a friend," Caroline from accounting timidly offered. "She just finished her master's in communications. She urgently needs work." Laura looked at her as if she had offered to send a lamb to the slaughter. "Are you sure? The position requires composure." "She's brilliant," Caroline insisted, though her voice betrayed doubt. "And she needs the money." "Call her." Laura closed her folder with determination. "But warn her to come prepared for the worst." The elevator doors opened on the wrong floor, and Jasmine Aranda cursed under her breath as she tried to balance her portfolio, the coffee she had bought on the way, and simultaneously fix the collar of the blouse she had ironed at 5 a.m. "Floor 48, please," she asked the executive who entered after her, who looked at her with a mix of curiosity and suspicion. She didn't fit there, and they both knew it. Her black pencil skirt, bought the day before, was a little tight. The heels, borrowed from her sister, were as comfortable as walking on knives. But her smile, that was genuinely hers. Wide, slightly crooked, impossible to contain, even in moments of nervousness. "First time at Altamira?" the executive asked, with a tone that suggested it might also be her last. "Is it that obvious?" Jasmine laughed, causing a few drops of coffee to escape her cup. "Damn, now I look like a clumsy, nervous beginner." "Good luck," he replied enigmatically as he exited on the 40th floor. When she finally arrived at the correct floor, the foyer gleamed with icy luxury, all white marble and polished steel. The receptionist, a woman with perfectly styled hair, scanned her head to toe with the efficiency of an industrial laser. "Jasmine Aranda, I have an interview for the executive assistant position." The receptionist arched a perfectly plucked eyebrow. "You're 10 minutes late." The traffic was... "Punctuality is essential for Mr. Altamira," the woman interrupted mercilessly. "This way." As she followed those heels clicking like hammers on the marble, Jasmine felt the stares of all the employees drilling into her. Their expressions ranged from curiosity to compassion, like spectators watching an inexperienced gladiator enter the arena. Turning a corner, fate decided to play a cruel joke. A tall man, impeccably dressed in a charcoal gray suit that must have cost more than her semi-annual rent, suddenly appeared in her path. The collision was inevitable. The coffee, of course, found its target on his immaculate white shirt. Time froze. The silence became tangible. "I am so sorry," Jasmine stammered, desperately searching her bag for a napkin. "Please let me help you." When she looked up, she met a pair of gray eyes that seemed to hold an Arctic storm. The man's jaw was clenched, as if restraining a tsunami of fury. "I suppose I should introduce myself," she said, trying to break the tension with a nervous smile. "I'm Jasmine Aranda, your potential new assistant." Though after this, I imagine the possibilities have considerably narrowed. The grimace on his face didn't budge an inch. Several employees witnessing the scene seemed to have stopped breathing. "I am Julian Altamira." Of course he was. The universe had an especially cruel sense of humor this morning. "A pleasure to meet you, Mr. Altamira." Jasmine extended her hand automatically, as if she hadn't just ruined his outfit. "I'm sorry about the coffee." "Yes, it's a consolation. It was excellent Americano. The barista told me the beans came from Colombia." Something unreadable crossed Julian's eyes. Incredulity? Indignation? A microscopic flicker of amusement instantly suppressed? "Do you always talk so much, Miss Aranda?" "Only when I'm nervous." Jasmine shrugged. "Or hungry, or actually awake." A nearby employee choked back a gasp, as if witnessing an act of suicide. "To my office," he ordered in a cutting voice. "Now!" As she followed him down the hall, feeling all eyes glued to her back, Jasmine leaned toward a woman who looked particularly horrified. "Is he always this friendly, or did I get the premium version today?" she whispered. The woman stared at her as if she had just signed her death warrant. The office doors opened before them, revealing a minimalist space with panoramic views of the city. Jasmine took a deep breath and entered after him, with a smile that defied all logic and common sense. The door closed with a definitive sound, like a trap snapping shut. A shared universe. "Do you know why I hired you, Miss Aranda?" The question hung in the air-conditioned office like a bubble about to burst. Jasmine, against all odds, was still standing in front of the glass desk, still employed. "For my charming first impression," she ventured, her fingers nervously fiddling with the edge of her skirt. Julian watched her with that intensity that made seasoned executives tremble. His eyes, darker in the natural light streaming through the windows, seemed to search for something in her. A flaw, a crack, something that justified firing her. "Because of your resume," he finally replied, lifting the folder containing her credentials. "Masters in Communications, specialization in corporate narratives, exceptional references." "Wow." Jasmine blinked in surprise. "And here I thought resumes went straight into the shredder." A microscopic wrinkle appeared between Julian's eyebrows, almost imperceptible, almost human. "I need someone who knows how to communicate," he continued, ignoring her comment. "The company is expanding into international markets. The current presentations lack impact. You want me to write your speeches? I want results." The assertion sliced the air like a razor. "Your first assignment, revise the presentation for the Japanese investors next month." Jasmine nodded, suddenly aware of the weight of the responsibility. It wasn't just an assistant role. It was a test, an experiment. "May I ask what happened to my predecessor?" "She did not meet my expectations." "And what exactly are your expectations, Mr. Altamira?" "Perfection." There was no boastfulness in his voice, only cold certainty. "Do you think you can handle that?" Jasmine's smile transformed into something more determined, deeper. "Give me a week with that presentation." The week passed in a whirlwind of midnight coffees and pre-dawn hours in front of the computer. Jasmine quickly discovered that working for Julian Altamira was like constantly dancing on the edge of a cliff. Thrilling, terrifying, addictive. Friday afternoon, Julian walked in unexpectedly as she furiously scribbled in her personal notebook, a worn-covered journal she carried everywhere. "What are you writing with such enthusiasm?" he asked, causing Jasmine to snap the notebook shut. "Nothing important. Miss Aranda, I detest lies more than incompetence." Their eyes met in a silent duel. Finally, she slid the notebook toward him. "They're observations. Things I see. People. Feelings." She shrugged, suddenly vulnerable. "I write to understand the world, to breathe. Julian skimmed the pages with an unreadable expression. There, between meeting notes and to-do lists, were fragments of prose that flowed like rivers of ink. The Altamira building. A crystal fortress where warriors wear Armani, and their weapons are sharp words in legal documents. No one visibly bleeds, but everyone carries scars. Further down, Julian keeps his gaze fixed on the horizon during meetings, as if he sees something the rest of us cannot perceive. What does a man who already has everything chase? What ghosts whisper in his ear when no one is watching? His expression shifted, so subtly that anyone else would have missed it. But Jasmine, who had spent the week studying every micro-expression on that marble-sculpted face, tourist. "You have talent," he admitted, handing her the notebook. "But it needs focus." "Was that a compliment, Mr. Altamira? I should mark this day on the calendar." It was a professional observation. "Right." Jasmine hid a smile. "Did you review the presentation I sent you?" "I reviewed it." He paused, a silence that seemed to stretch infinitely. "It's acceptable." Coming from him, it was equivalent to a standing ovation. "However," he continued, "I need you to present it personally to our partners in Monterey." "Excuse me?" "We leave tomorrow. The private jet takes off at 8. It was not an invitation. It was a decree. A weekend. With him. Alone. "Shouldn't I go with an executive, sir? I've only been here a week. No one knows that presentation better than you." His eyes narrowed slightly. "Unless you don't feel prepared." The challenge hung in the air, impossible to ignore. "I'll be ready," Jasmine replied, lifting her chin with determination. The stars and the corporate air, the private jet was a world apart. Italian leather, polished wood, and a silence so exquisite it almost hurt. Jasmine watched the clouds out the window, while Julian reviewed documents with the concentration of a surgeon in mid-operation. "Do you ever rest?" she asked, breaking the sacred silence. "Do you rest?" he countered without looking up. "I've seen you writing until 2 in the morning. How do you know?" "The system logs server access times. That's disturbingly thorough. It's efficient." For the first time on the flight, he looked at her directly. "Why do you write so much in that notebook of yours?" The question caught her off guard. It wasn't simple professional curiosity. There was something more. "Because words give shape to what we feel," she answered honestly. "To name something is to begin to understand it." "And what are you trying to understand, Miss Aranda?" "Everything." Her smile became enigmatic. "And you, of course." A flash of something. Surprise? Interest? Crossed Julian's face before he returned to his documents. The arrival at the 5-star hotel in Monterey brought an unforeseen complication. The impeccably uniformed receptionist gave them a practiced smile. "Welcome to the Grand Palace. We have your executive suite ready, Mr. Altamira." "Suite," Jasmine interrupted. "There should be 2 separate rooms." The woman typed nervously on her computer. "I apologize, but we only have 1 reservation. The suite has a separate living area with a sofa bed, if you prefer." "That's fine," Julian interjected in a cutting voice. "It's a misunderstanding by my travel assistant." As the bellhop guided them toward the golden elevators, Jasmine felt her heart hammering against her ribs. 1 room, a weekend, and that enigmatic man who was starting to occupy too much space on the pages of her notebook, crossing the threshold of the luxurious suite, with its panoramic views of the mountains surrounding the city. Jasmine dropped her small suitcase and turned to him with a challenging smile. "Relax, I don't bite, unless provoked." The digital clock read 2 in the morning when Jasmine stepped out onto the suite's balcony. The city of Monterey stretched beneath her like a sea of twinkling lights, while the silhouette of the mountains cut the horizon into majestic shadows. She couldn't sleep. The sofa bed was surprisingly comfortable. That wasn't the problem. It was Julian's presence on the other side of the ajar bedroom door that kept her thoughts spinning like an unstoppable carousel. Insomnia? The deep voice emerged from the shadows, startling her. Julian appeared on the balcony wearing only black pajama bottoms. The silver moon outlined the contours of his torso with sculptural precision. Jasmine had to make a conscious effort to keep her gaze fixed on his eyes. "Nights have always belonged to me more than days," she replied, leaning on the railing. "It's when thoughts flow most clearly." "And what thoughts keep you awake tonight, Miss Aranda?" "Jasmine," she corrected softly. "At 2 a.m, I think we can dispense with the formalities." A comfortable silence settled between them as they gazed at the nocturnal panorama. It seemed impossible that this tranquil man was the same executive feared by the entire company. "Why the writing?" he asked suddenly. The question floated between them like a paper boat on deep waters. "My mother was a literature professor," Jasmine began, surprising herself by sharing something so personal. "Every night she read me stories where words built bridges between impossible worlds. When she died, I found that writing was my way of continuing the conversation with her." Julian nodded slowly, as if receiving an unexpected revelation. "And you? What led you to the corporate world?" she asked. "Expectations," he replied dryly. "Third-generation businessman. The Altamira name comes with predetermined obligations." "Did you never dream of something different?" An enigmatic smile, the first genuine one Jasmine had ever seen from him, curved his lips slightly. "Astronomy," he confessed in a low voice, like revealing a forbidden secret. "I spent entire nights with a rickety telescope on our rooftop, mapping constellations." "And what happened to that dream?" "My father found it inappropriate for the heir to the Altamira Empire." His gaze was lost somewhere on the horizon. "The telescope disappeared. The stars remained, but they no longer belonged to me." Something stirred in Jasmine's chest, an unexpected tenderness toward this man who guarded an entire universe beneath his icy facade. "The stars always belong to us," she murmured. "We just have to remember how to look at them." Their eyes met in this twilight, and for an instant, time seemed to stand still. Their defenses, meticulously built over the years for very different reasons, began to crack like ice floes in spring. A kiss and a retreat. The morning brought the return of professional masks. During the presentation with the investors, Jasmine eloquently presented the expansion plan, while Julian watched, his expression inscrutable as always. The Japanese, normally reserved, could not ignore her impact. The main representative approached Julian. "Impressive presentation. Your team clearly understands our cultural vision." When the businessmen left, Julian turned to her. "Excellent work," he pronounced with that economy of words that characterized him, but his eyes communicated much more. The tension between them had taken on a new quality, electric, vibrant, unlike anything she had seen before. That night, the celebratory dinner at the hotel's panoramic restaurant unfolded with increasingly personal conversations and silences charged with meaning. "What is your biggest fear?" she asked, definitively abandoning the formal usted over glasses of red wine. "Failure," he replied automatically. "No," Jasmine shook her head. "That's the rehearsed answer." The question hung between them, unanswered. Back in the suite, Jasmine paused in front of the door of her makeshift room. The full moon poured its silver light through the windows, casting sharp shadows on the walls. "Thank you for trusting me with this presentation," she said, aware that she was referring to much more than just work. "You have a gift with words," he replied, moving imperceptibly closer. "You see things others don't notice, just like you with the stars." The distance between them narrowed to inches. Jasmine's breathing became shallow, while the entire universe seemed to contract to that single point in space. It was impossible to determine who took the first step. Like two planets caught in mutual gravitation, they simply collided. The kiss started soft, almost tentative, a question formulated with lips instead of words. But it quickly transformed into something voracious, desperate, a thirst they hadn't known they had until that precise moment. Julian's hands framed her face with surprising delicacy, while hers clung to his shirt, as if she feared everything would vanish. Time lost all meaning as they discovered a new language, more primal and honest than any they had shared until then. Jasmine saw something new in those habitually impenetrable eyes: vulnerability. And it was precisely that which terrified her. She took a step back, separating herself from the magnetic heat of his body. "This," her voice trembled slightly, "this is a mistake." A shadow crossed Julian's face so quickly it almost seemed imaginary. "Why?" His voice was hoarser. "What more is in your book?" The words escaped her lips before she could contain them. "I've seen how things work in your world. Everything is temporary, replaceable. I am much more than a passing story." Julian remained still in his room and closed the door, leaning against it as silent tears rolled down her cheeks. On the other side, without her being able to see it, Julian stood motionless, his palm pressed against the wood separating them. So close, and yet so far. The unspoken collaboration. The return to Mexico City took place in a thick silence that seemed to have solidified, crystallized by that kiss that neither mentioned, but both remembered with painful clarity. For the following week, Jasmine plunged fiercely into her work. Her reports were impeccable, her emails precise, her schedule meticulous. The perfect executive assistant, nothing more, nothing less. The employees of Altamira Corporate watched in amazement as she lasted beyond the fateful month, breaking the curse of previous assistants. Some even began to smile at her in the hallways, as if she had conquered hostile territory. What no one knew was that every night, upon returning to her small apartment, Jasmine poured her emotions into feverish texts she never showed anyone. Pages and pages about a man with storm eyes who had gazed at the stars before burying his dreams under layers of responsibility and other people's expectations. Thursday afternoon, as she organized documents in the empty office, Julian's voice startled her. "I need a text for Fortune magazine." His tone was professional, distant. "A column on business innovation in Latin America." "Of course, any specific focus?" "Something fresh, authentic. I write like a corporate manual. I need your perspective." The request, with its implicit acknowledgement of her talent, took her by surprise. "I can prepare a draft by tomorrow. I need it today." Their eyes met briefly. "Stay after hours if necessary." When the clock struck 9 at night, the corridors of Altamira Corporate lay deserted. Jasmine stared at her computer screen, putting the finishing touches on a text that had flowed from her fingers with surprising ease. The door to the main office opened. Julian emerged with his tie loosened and his shirt sleeves rolled up to his elbows, revealing muscular forearms that hinted at secret hours in some private gym. "Are you done?" "Just sent to your email." Jasmine began gathering her things. "I hope it's what you were looking for." Minutes later, his voice stopped her just as she was about to leave. "This is extraordinary." Jasmine turned to find him staring at the screen with an expression of genuine astonishment. "It's honest," she said simply. "It's brilliant." He looked at her with an intensity that made her pulse race. "I'll submit it with my signature, but I want you to write more. As a literary ghost? As an uncredited collaborator. For now," he added with a different tone. "About what happened in Monterey, I'd rather not talk about it." Jasmine raised a hand defensively. "It was a moment of confusion. We are professionals. We can move past it." Something indefinable crossed Julian's face. Disappointment? Relief? He nodded briefly. "Of course. A new contract." Over the following weeks, a clandestine pattern emerged between them. Jasmine wrote speeches, articles, press releases, pieces that made Julian shine in the business world without anyone knowing that those words came from the pen of his assistant. What began as a collaboration gradually morphed into something more intimate. Nights spent working side by side in the office. Late dinners ordered in while discussing ideas. Conversations that drifted into personal territories before being carefully steered back to the professional. An electrical tension permanently floated between them. In sustained glances, a second longer than necessary. In fingers that accidentally brushed when exchanging documents. In silences heavy with unspoken words. Your last column generated requests from 3 international publications, Julian commented one night as they shared Thai food in his office. They want more of the visionary Julian Altamira, of the visionary ghost, she corrected with an ironic smile. You should sign the next one. The proposal left her momentarily speechless. Why? Because it's fair. Their eyes met. Because you have talent. Because you deserve recognition. And what would your shareholders say if they discovered that the literary genius of Julian Altamira actually comes from his assistant with no business pedigree? I don't care what they think. The vehemence in his voice surprised her. It was the first visible crack in that facade of a perfect executive he showed the world. Since when? Since someone spilled coffee on my favorite shirt and didn't apologize properly. A spontaneous laugh escaped Jasmine's lips. It was excellent coffee. It would have been a fake apology. They laughed together, and for a moment, all barriers seemed to dissolve. When the laughter subsided, the distance between them had imperceptibly shrunk. Jasmine! The office phone interrupted the moment. Julian answered with evident annoyance, listened briefly, and hung up. The charity gala. His expression turned serious. I need to attend. This Saturday. It's on your schedule. All confirmed. I want you to come with me. The request hung between them like a dangerous invitation. As your assistant? As my date. Jasmine's heart gave a treacherous leap. I don't think that's appropriate. Nothing that has happened between us is. His eyes darkened. And yet, here we are. The interruption and the revelation, the emerald dress Jasmine chose for the gala hugged her figure like midnight water. When she entered the ballroom on Julian's arm, conversations momentarily hushed before resuming in speculative murmurs. Everyone is looking, she whispered, suddenly conscious of her position. Let them look. Julian's hand rested on the small of her back, firm, possessive. You are stunning. The evening passed between glasses of champagne, superficial conversations with the business elite, and formal dances. But when the string quartet began a slow waltz, something changed in the atmosphere between them. Julian guided her onto the floor with a natural grace that revealed years of privileged schooling. Their bodies fit together perfectly as they moved to the music, oblivious to the curious glances following them. Why are you looking at me like that? She asked, aware of the fire burning in those habitually cold eyes. Because I can no longer pretend you are only my assistant. The words detonated a silent explosion in Jasmine's chest. Before she could reply, an elegant figure appeared at the edge of her peripheral vision. A stunning woman, with immaculately styled black hair and a red dress that looked painted onto her sculpted body, watched them from a distance. Her perfectly outlined lips curved into a calculated smile as her eyes, sharp as daggers, assessed Jasmine with clinical precision. Who is she? Jasmine asked, feeling an inexplicable chill. Julian followed her gaze, and his body instantly tensed. Serena Valverde. His voice became strangely flat. My ex-fiancée. The week following the gala was a fever dream for Jasmine. Something fundamental had shifted between them that night. A mutual recognition impossible to ignore. Stolen glances transformed into stolen caresses in the empty elevator. Professional conversations gave way to whispered confessions behind closed doors. A parallel universe where only the two of them existed, separated from the outside world by fragile glass walls. No one at Altamira Corporate dared to openly comment, but rumors ran like underground rivers. The way he sought any excuse to call her to his office. The way she smiled, reading his messages. Minute details forming a mosaic impossible to hide from the most attentive eyes. You're playing with fire, Caroline warned her during a rushed lunch in the cafeteria. I don't know what you're talking about, Jasmine replied distractedly, stirring her salad. Everyone is talking. Caroline lowered her voice. You and Altamira. Whatever is going on between you. We are professionals working together. Professionals who devour each other with their eyes when they think no one is watching. Her friend sighed. Just be careful. That world you're entering has different rules. Jasmine wanted to reply, but the words vanished at the sight she caught over Caroline's shoulder. A slender figure advanced through the cafeteria, magnetically attracting glances. Serena Valverde, impeccable in an ivory pantsuit, walked as if the floor beneath her feet had the privilege of holding her. What is she doing here? Jasmine murmured, feeling a knot form in her stomach. Who? Julian's ex-fiancée. Caroline subtly turned. Serena Valverde, heiress of Valverde Investments. Her expression turned worried. She hasn't set foot in this building since they broke off the engagement 2 years ago. Something big must be happening. For the rest of the day, Jasmine tried to focus on her work, while Serena's presence floated like a toxic cloud through the halls. Julian was inaccessible, locked in back-to-back meetings. Her messages went unanswered, fueling a growing anxiety she tried unsuccessfully to rationalize. At 6 in the evening, when most employees were beginning to leave, the door to the main office finally opened. Serena emerged first, followed by Julian, whose face had returned to that impenetrable mask Jasmine thought she had forgotten. We need to talk, he said in a voice she didn't recognize. The office, normally a space she associated with moments of stolen intimacy, now felt strangely hostile. Julian remained standing by the windows, gazing at the city gradually lighting up under the twilight. Is everything all right? She asked, hating the insecurity that crept into her voice. Serena is returning to the board of directors. The words dropped like stones into still water. Her father controls enough shares to demand it. I understand. Jasmine maintained a professional tone. Should I prepare a press release? It won't be necessary. Julian finally turned to her. Is there anything else? The door opened at that moment. Serena entered with the grace of a panther, closing it behind her like someone establishing territory. Excuse the interruption, she said, with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. I forgot my handbag. Her gaze swept over Jasmine with false cordiality. You must be the famous assistant. Everyone speaks wonders of your dedication. Thank you. Jasmine instinctively straightened her back. It's a pleasure to meet you officially, Miss Valverde. Serena, please. Her smile widened like that of a predator, savoring the moment before the attack. After all, we are practically family. The air in the room froze. Jasmine looked at Julian, whose expression had become inscrutable. I suppose you haven't had time to tell her our news. Serena advanced toward him, placing a possessive hand on his arm. Men and their priorities. Serena, this is not the time, Julian warned, palpable tension in his jaw. Why not? She's part of your trusted team, isn't she? Serena turned to Jasmine with studied innocence. I'm pregnant. 8 weeks. The world seemed to stop. Jasmine felt the oxygen leave the room as the words pierced her chest like poisoned daggers. I always knew you'd come back to me, Serena continued, addressing Julian in a honeyed voice. Now you have no choice. Julian remained motionless, like a statue trapped between two opposing forces. Is it true? Jasmine's voice emerged surprisingly steady. It's complicated, he replied. 3 syllables, no denial. Jasmine gathered her belongings with mechanical movements as a strange calm replaced the initial storm. Her body seemed to move of its own accord, with a dignity she didn't know she possessed. Congratulations to both of you, she pronounced with glacial serenity. I will submit my resignation tomorrow. Jasmine, wait. She raised a hand, stopping him. Thank you for showing me that it wasn't your story, but your mistake. The walk to the elevator became interminable. Every step echoed in the empty corridor as she fought to maintain her composure. Only when the metal doors closed behind her did she allow the first tear to roll silently down her cheek. A letter and a chase. The pre-dawn found Jasmine sitting on the floor of her apartment, surrounded by scribbled pages. She had written furiously for hours, not about stars or dreams, but about the devastating clarity that follows disillusionment. When she finished, she looked at the pages scattered around her. There was her heart, dissected into paragraphs and metaphors, more honest than she had ever been with herself. With trembling fingers, she gathered the sheets and carefully organized them. She took a large envelope from her desk drawer and wrote a name on the outside in neat handwriting. Julian Altamira. At 7 a.m., as the corporate building was just waking up, she left the envelope on the empty desk she had occupied during those months that now seemed to belong to another life. She didn't collect her belongings. She didn't say goodbye to anyone. She simply walked toward the elevators for the last time. In his office, oblivious to her presence, Julian contemplated the sunrise with eyes red from a sleepless night. The phone rang insistently until he finally answered. "Mr. Altamira." The receptionist's voice sounded confused. "Your assistant left something for you, but she's already gone." Minutes later, Julian opened the envelope with impatient fingers. The pages fell onto his desk like autumn leaves, fragile, beautiful, definitive. The first line struck his chest with the force of an invisible fist. There are loves that are comets, bright, spectacular, and destined to disappear after briefly lighting up the sky. Ours didn't even manage to be that. It was barely a match lit in a storm, condemned from the start, but no less luminous while it lasted. 3 weeks. 21 exact days since Jasmine had left Altamira Corporate, taking much more than her talent with words. Spring had given way to a relentless summer that punished the city with suffocating temperatures, as if the weather itself reflected Julian's internal state. The executive office, once a sanctuary of efficiency and order, had become the stage for his deterioration. Accumulated reports, unanswered calls, postponed meetings. The empire was beginning to feel the absence of its helm. "Your father would never allow this mess," Serena commented, inspecting the office with disdain. Her slender figure encased in a navy dress stood out against the chaos of scattered documents. "How many assistants have you fired this week? 3? 4? None met the requirements," he replied dryly, without taking his eyes off the window. "Curious coincidence." Serena approached with calculated steps. "None write like her, do they?" The indirect mention of Jasmine caused the muscles in his jaw to tense visibly. The letter remained tucked in the top drawer of his desk, a constant reminder of what he had lost through cowardice, through his inability to face the truth at the crucial moment. "The board is worried," she continued, strategically changing the subject. "The Japanese investors are uneasy since they received that very bureaucratic press release. Can I handle it?" "No, you can't." Serena rested both hands on the desk, leaning toward him. "Look at you. You're falling apart, and everyone notices. What did you really come here for?" The question floated between them like a challenge. For the first time since her return, Serena's mask of perfection showed a slight fissure, a flash of calculation behind the feigned concern. "To save you from yourself." Her crimson lips curved into a smile that didn't reach her eyes. As always, Julian watched her with renewed clarity, as if he suddenly saw past the mirage she had constructed. "The pregnancy." His voice took on a dangerous edge. "I want to see the medical results." Serena's expression changed imperceptibly. "Now you doubt me? After everything we've shared?" "The results, Serena." A tense silence settled between them. The ticking clock marked the seconds as a silent duel unfolded. "They don't exist." The confession finally emerged, surprisingly devoid of remorse. "But it was necessary. You were ruining your life, your reputation, for a mere assistant with no connections." The fury that flooded Julian was so intense that he had to cling to the edge of the desk to avoid losing control. "Get out of my office!" "Don't be dramatic. I did what was best for you. Kijang for the company. I always have." "The best?" The laugh that escaped his throat sounded strange, even to himself. "You destroyed the only authentic thing that has existed in my life since I gave up the stars." The mention of that secret, one he had never shared with Serena during their years together, seemed to unsettle her momentarily. "You'll find her." Her voice took on a condescending tone. "If she means that much to you, look for her. Offer her a better position, a sky-high salary. Everyone has a price. That is your fundamental error." Julian stood up, suddenly energized by a clarity that had been eluding him for weeks. "You believe everyone operates under your same rules, that everything boils down to power, money, and appearances. And isn't it? Not for her." Serena's eyes narrowed dangerously. "That nobody wrote every brilliant word that has come out of this office in recent months." Julian opened a drawer and pulled out a folder. "Including this report that secured you a spot on the board." The surprise on Serena's face was genuine for the first time. "Impossible. That report was masterful, eloquent, visionary." Julian completed the sentence. "Because she wrote it." With determined movements, he began gathering his things. Keys, phone, Jasmine's letter carefully folded. "Where do you think you're going? We have a meeting with the investors in 20 minutes. Cancel it." "You can't just—" She trailed off. The determination on his face must have been convincing. Because for the first time, Serena found no words to stop him. A star in the rain. The rain fell relentlessly over Mexico City, turning the streets into tumultuous rivers and the sky into a uniform gray canvas. Sitting by the window of her small apartment, Jasmine watched the drops slide down the glass as she typed furiously on her computer. The blog she had started 3 weeks ago, almost as therapy, was beginning to gain followers. Confessions of a ghostwriter, anonymous stories about the dynamics of corporate power, interspersed with sharp observations and a prose that danced between literary and journalistic styles. A way to exorcise demons and perhaps keep alive the connection to the world she had left behind. The doorbell rang unexpectedly, interrupting her thoughts. Opening the door, the sight left her momentarily breathless. Julian Altamira was soaked to the bone, his dark hair plastered to his forehead, his white shirt turned into a transparent second skin. His eyes, usually controlled, burned with an almost feverish intensity. "How did you find my address?" was all she managed to articulate. "I'm the CEO of a multinational, and I asked Caroline for help." A crooked, surprisingly vulnerable smile touched his face. "What do you want?" "The truth." "You're late. You already have a truth on the way." The bitterness in her voice was palpable. "Congratulations, by the way. There is no pregnancy." The words emerged forcefully. Serena lied. Time seemed to stop as she processed the information. "And you waited 3 weeks to tell me?" "Because I'm a coward." He took a step toward her. "Because I didn't find out until today. Because I didn't deserve your forgiveness." The rage Jasmine had kept bottled up began to boil, mixing with a confusing sense of relief. "And what am I supposed to do with that information? Applaud? Thank you?" "No." Another step. "Just listen to me." The rain intensified outside, creating a watery curtain that isolated that moment from the rest of the world. "I read your letter." His voice cracked slightly. "Every word, repeatedly, until it was etched in my memory. You wrote things that broke me and also healed me." The phrase disarmed her defenses. Almost imperceptibly, Jasmine relaxed her posture, allowing the threshold between them to become less insurmountable. "And what now, Julian? Do I go back to work as if nothing happened? Do we continue writing brilliant speeches while pretending there's nothing more?" The answer hung in the air between them. The rain hammered with renewed fury. a perfect backdrop for the drama unfolding in that anonymous hallway of an ordinary building where two wounded people faced the possibility of something that seemed simultaneously inevitable and impossible. The choice of the stars. "I don't want you back as my assistant." The statement hung between them as Jasmine's apartment remained in shadow, lit only by the bluish light of her computer and the occasional lightning that cast ghostly shadows on the walls. She had finally allowed him in, more because of the storm's insistence than her own will. Jasmine kept her distance, leaning against the windowsill, creating a deliberate space between them. Her whole body longed to move closer, but her dignity demanded caution. Julian surveyed the small space, a modest living room that also functioned as a writing studio. Books stacked in unstable towers, abandoned coffee mugs, sticky notes with fragments of incomplete thoughts, the natural habitat of a creative mind so different from the sterile perfection of his own penthouse. "I want to offer you a position as Director of Communications," he finally said, pulling a folder from his wet briefcase. "With your name on every text, with public recognition. And why would I do that? Because you have a gift that deserves to be celebrated, not hidden." His eyes took on a hypnotic intensity. "But that's not the real reason I'm here." He pulled out another envelope, smaller and worn from constant handling. Jasmine immediately recognized her own handwriting on the outside. "I've read these pages every night," he continued, approaching cautiously. "No one has ever seen me with such clarity. The loneliness behind the power, the golden cage I built around my dreams. It was just catharsis," she murmured, suddenly vulnerable at the idea that her most intimate words had been repeatedly dissected. "No," Julian vehemently denied. "It was brutal honesty, the kind of truth no one dares to tell me since I inherited the Altamira name." A particularly violent thunder shook the windows, as if the sky itself underscored the intensity of the moment. "Do you remember what you wrote here?" He pointed to a specific paragraph. "No one should give up contemplating their own stars, not even to build empires of glass and steel." Jasmine nodded silently. She remembered every word poured onto those feverish pages. 2 weeks ago, I went up to the rooftop of the corporate building and installed a telescope. A shy, almost childlike smile lit up his habitually severe face. "For the first time in 20 years, I observed the constellations. Thanks to you." The confession uprooted something deep inside Jasmine, a seed of tenderness she thought she had definitively eradicated. "That doesn't change what happened. Doesn't change. I'm not pretending it does." He took another tentative step toward her. "I just want to show you that your words have power, that they can transform realities. And Serena? Off the board, out of my life." His voice took on a definitive tone. "I chose my own stars this time." The distance between them had shrunk to barely a meter. The familiar electricity returned, more intense than ever. "There's something else." Julian pulled another envelope from his briefcase. "Your blog. Confessions of a Ghostwriter. I found out 3 days ago." Jasmine paled. "How?" "Your style is unmistakable." A proud smile curved his lips, like a literary fingerprint. "It's just a hobby. It's brilliant." The admiration in his voice was undeniable. So much so that I sent it to Edward Mendon, the editor of Nova Literatura. Incredulity strained her voice. "He wants to meet you, to talk about a book, a weekly column." He extended the envelope toward her. "The decision is yours, of course. Your talent deserves its own stage." The sincerity in his eyes was overwhelming. "Because I needed to show you that your voice matters, that it always mattered." A silence charged with meaning settled between them, interrupted only by the constant drumming of the rain against the window panes. "I am not asking you to forgive me," he finally continued, "only to consider that perhaps, this time, we could write a different story. Together." Epilogue. A Star is Born literature glowed under a night sky exceptionally clear for Mexico City. Small fairy lights intertwined in pergolas created a magical atmosphere, while a table for two awaited next to a strategically placed professional telescope. Jasmine contemplated the city from the railing, wrapped in a midnight blue dress that seemed to capture fragments of stars with every movement. Her transformation during those weeks had been as internal as it was external. The confidence of someone who finally finds her place in the universe. Her weekly column, Observations from the Heights, had quickly become essential reading for thousands. Her blog, now backed by a publishing house, multiplied followers daily, and the manuscript of her first book rested freshly printed on the table, prepared for the intimate celebration. It looks like a constellation brought to life. Julian's voice made her turn. He approached with 2 glasses of champagne and an expression that mixed pride with something deeper, more vulnerable. "Is this how you saw them from your childhood rooftop?" she asked, accepting the glass. "As women dancing among stars? I saw them as stories waiting to be discovered." His fingers deliberately brushed hers. "Like I see you now." Over those months, they had slowly rebuilt their relationship. Professional encounters that stretched into the early morning. Conversations about books, dreams, and parallel universes. Casual dinners that ended with long nightly walks. Neither had pressured for definitions or labels, allowing trust to regenerate naturally like a garden after winter. "I have something for you." Julian pulled a small package from his jacket. A first edition. Jasmine carefully unwrapped the paper to find her own book, Unspoken Words, with her name in gold lettering on the deep blue cover. "Open it," he whispered. On the first page, next to the printed dedication, Julian had handwritten a note. "For the woman who taught me to rediscover the stars. Will you marry me, even if it means arguing over coffee every morning?" Time seemed to stop as Jasmine looked up from the book to find Julian holding a ring with a tiny sapphire star. "It's too soon," she murmured, though her heart contradicted her words. On the contrary, Julian gently took her hand. "We've been writing this story together for months, word by word, truth by truth. And what about Altamira Corporate, your empire? It's still there, but now I also have a telescope." A genuine smile illuminated his face. "And it turns out the universe is much vaster and more interesting than I remembered." Jasmine contemplated the ring, then the city spread beneath her feet, and finally, the eyes of the man who had rediscovered his humanity through her words. "I accept," she replied with a radiant smile. "But I write the vows and the rules." Julian's laughter echoed into the night, free, authentic, completely new. His hands framed Jasmine's face with reverence before sealing the promise with a kiss that held entire universes. Under the starry vault, their silhouettes merged into one as the city twinkled like a reflection of the sky. Now, she wrote her own story, with love, freedom, and him by her side. A new chapter was beginning, not written in the stars, but in the infinite possibilities of 2 hearts that finally found where words make a home.